Former President Jacob Zuma on Sunday telling his supporters that former Public Protector Advocate Thuli Madonsela conspired against him to establish the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. Zuma also claimed that Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, now acting Chief Justice, was not his first choice to chair the commission. Of course, the former president handing himself over to police, to correctional facilities, in the early hours of this morning to begin that 15-month prison term. But to weigh in on these widespread allegations, we're joined now by Advocate Thuli Madonsela, who is, of course, the former Public Protector. Advocate Madonsela, it's great to have you with us on the show this morning, 6 hours after that warrant of 6 or 7 hours after that warrant of arrest expired for the former president. The country waking up to Jacob Zuma beginning his 15-month jail term today. It's an incredible moment in the country, whichever side of the fence you're on.
Good morning, Michelle. Thank you for the privilege, and good morning to everyone. It is quite a momentous occasion. It's also a sad occasion, and an elderly gentleman is going to jail. I don't know whether because he was advised wrongly or because he was stubborn. Nonetheless, the rule of law grinds on, and it's the right thing that court orders be executed without fear or favor.
I mean, you've been again at the center of what the former president has been telling his supporters in the run-up to his incarceration over the weekend. He puts the blame squarely on your shoulders. One, for putting together and recommending that the State Capture Commission of Inquiry be put together. And secondly, for the reason why Deputy Chief Justice at the time, Raymond Zondo, was appointed to chair the inquiry.
Well, firstly, Michelle, as I said to one of your colleagues earlier, nobody has a right to be judged by a judge of his or her own choice. He's lucky that because he was president, he had an opportunity to appoint the judge. The Public Protector report was very clear that the appointment powers remained with the president because nobody has the powers to take those powers away from the president. So the president appointed Judge Zondo. He was selected by the Chief Justice. And for the president to try and make people believe otherwise is really sad. But even if he hadn't selected Judge Zondo, he had a duty to appear before him, as are all of the other people that are appearing before Deputy Chief Justice Zondo. They didn't select him, they didn't appoint him, but they trust that he will be just.
Advocate, I'm interested to know from you, whether you are keen to respond to all of the allegations that the former president has made against a number of people, and specifically against you yourself in your role as the former public protector in the country. There is a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of sort of twisting of the processes that were followed in terms of setting up the state capture inquiry. Is that something that you feel strongly about setting the record straight? Or do you feel that perhaps one day the former president himself will say, actually, this is how things unfolded?
I'm certain that the former President Zuma will one day tell the truth. It's clear to me that in trying to get sympathy from ordinary good human beings, he has, at this stage, elected to misinform them. That's really sad. It's sad for him as a human being. It's sad for him as a grown-up to resort to lies to get sympathy. But it's even worse and even more sad that the person who is misinforming the public in order to get sympathy is a former president of this great country.
I mean, 11th hour proceedings in the run-up to his arrest, and there were many of those moves being made in the background before the warrant of arrest would have expired at midnight last night. I think you alluded to this at the beginning of our conversation. Do you get a sense that the former president is being advised, and perhaps some opinion will say advised incorrectly?
Certainly, if it's on the advice of his lawyers that he's done all of the things he has done today to avoid being held accountable and to avoid subjecting himself to an order of a court and an order of the apex court of this country. If that was the advice of his lawyers, then they misadvised him. But I do suspect that perhaps even if he was advised, he decided to make his own bed, which sadly he now has to lie on it.
Mm. And of course, the state capture inquiry is what's at the center of this guilty verdict in terms of contempt for not adhering to that order from the Constitutional Court to appear before the state capture inquiry. And in many respects, sort of the integrity of the inquiry itself and its processes is connected very, very closely to what's unfolded over the past couple of days in the country.
Absolutely, Michelle. To set the record straight, there was only one person accused of wrongdoing when I did the state capture investigation, and that person was the then President Zuma. And it was alleged that he was either deliberately enabling or allowing the Guptas and companies co-owned by the Guptas and his son to influence the appointment of ministers, directors of SOEs, and other strategic appointments in government to get people fired when they did not cooperate and to have them replaced. And that this was then leveraged to enable companies co-owned by the Guptas and his son to get contracts in government, licenses that are controlled by the state, and to avoid accountability, among other things. And for President Zuma to then say, this thing is now being made about him, it wasn't meant to be about him. Sadly, it was about him. And all he needed to do during my time and now during Deputy Chief Justice Zondo's term was just to give us his side of the story. And he's been refusing to do that.
And of course, you know, Advocate Madonsela, just your final comment insofar as the state capture inquiry is concerned, because in many respects it does feel like, as big of a moment as this is in our country's history, that it is still a sideshow to the phenomenon of state capture and what it has done to our country in terms of hollowing out SOEs, the state of our economy, our inability to provide basic services, and all of that has sort of come crashing down in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. So yes, a big moment for the former president, for our democracy, for the rule of law. But there is still the big job of the state capture inquiry to get justice for ordinary South Africans.
You're absolutely right. That the arrest is a sideshow and it should never have happened. But of course, the only person who could have prevented the arrest is former President Zuma himself. And sadly, he allowed things to reach the point where they are. And the commission does continue, and it will continue, and it will make conclusions. Those conclusions will have consequences for anybody who's found to have aided or perpetrated state capture.
Former Public Protector, Advocate Thuli Madonsela, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks very much for your time this morning on the AM Report.